Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Viking podcast. And I am delighted to be joined today by none other than Mr. Ben Moser. Ben, how you doing, bud?
Hey, morning. Yeah, I'm great. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Very excited.
Absolute pleasure. We've obviously been waffling away pre-mic yet again. A 20-minute pre-pod conversation, which was absolutely adorable. So, for those who don't know, Ben is part of the Peterman dynasty. I think we can use that tagline. Chatting with your mum yesterday, but yeah, Peterman's down in Turnhill, and you've got another office. Edgware, that's right. So yeah, you've been going kind of 60 plus years. Started by your dad and started by your grandfather and great uncle.
Correct. And then mum and cousin then took it over from them, and then I joined the company directorship 7.5 years ago.
So you were in the business before then, or yeah,
that's right. So I started from right at the bottom. I actually started when I was at school, just doing Saturday work. Then obviously went off to university. Then, like most people, unless you're very focused, were like, I don't know what to do for a job. So I was like, what do I know? I know property. So went and did some work up in North London for a while, then came back with some ideas, and then went from negotiator, then valuing, then both. Then from there, we opened another office in Dulwich, which we had for a good amount of time. And yeah, from there, obviously, went up into kind of part of the leadership team, as it is, and been there since.
Cool. And then, so, you know, and then let's talk about your kind of more recent journey. So obviously, you know, done the whole family thing. What was that like coming up through a family business? I mean, I think by the sound of it, you were brought up the right way. I think the family businesses I hear that tend to do really well, you know, they don't do the special ladder. You know, you come in at the bottom, you learn the ropes from the ground up, you start like any other junior employee, and you work your way through and you kind of learn your craft, hone your craft.
100%, yeah. I would say, if anything, it was harder for me. I had a number of chances at different points in my career to go to corporates, to other independents, which I did do to begin with. And then I think I just thought there's a real niche that we have here that, combined with some of my own experiences, would really make a difference. But yeah, there's been a real focus for me on making it abundantly clear that I've earned my place here over that time. Because yeah, the perception is obviously, as you say, that there's sort of special ladder as such, and there definitely is not. If I didn't deserve to be here like anybody else, I wouldn't be. 100%.
And do you feel like that pressure to prove yourself, was that kind of something that you felt came from working for your family, or was that a pressure you kind of felt like you put on yourself?
Definitely on myself. The family, the business as it is obviously, we as a company are quite forgiving, I would say. As an independent family-run business, we like to believe that pushing the positivity to staff gets the positivity back. But obviously from the family side of things, yeah, you know, there's always going to be an extra element of pressure, because the business has been going as long as it has. It's obviously, for me, the third generation of it. And obviously my experiences and my ideas are very different to, you know, my amazing grandfather's, who is as big a hero of mine as there can be. We have very different ideas. I have different ideas to Howard and to my mum, but we also are able to share those ideas. But also, if they're not good in anyone's cases, it's a lot easier for someone to say, you know, that's complete shit, or but not quite as blunt.
Maybe not quite that brutal.
It depends.
It really is shit.
Unless it's absolute garbage, and then you're just like, you know, what the hell are you doing? But no, I always put pressure on myself. I always have done. and that's a personal thing, but it does help to drive, new ideas for the business, new partnership opportunities with different sort of providers, different options out there in the market. I mean, as you'll know, with the amazing work you do, there are opportunities for agency all over the place, right? And just finding the ones that work best and seeing if they'll stick.
Yeah, and I think, obviously, I know what we're about to talk about. For those who don't know Ben and kind of what his core objectives are, I think before we get into the detail of it, I think there's a growing voice within our industry. Maybe not to, what am I trying to say here? To create a more beneficial POS, I think is for a simplistic phrasing. I think there's a growing part of our industry, thankfully, that has got away from that mindset of it's just a deal, and it's not about the property, it's not about the people, it's just about doing the deals and bringing in the bucks. And I think particularly in lettings, I think that was historically a problem and is for a lot of agents. They are just largely seen as transactions. But I think there is a growing change with that, and whether that is companies like ours, like Base, like Paramount, Location, Swindon Home Finders, I can list hundreds of quality letting agents up and down the country who have, for want of a better phrase, woken up to the fact that it is an entire ecosystem, and you have your landlords and your tenants, and favouring either one of those is at least a danger to your business, and if not, a bit of a social injustice to a certain extent. I think it's really lovely to see a growing plethora of our industry genuinely delivering or wanting to deliver a great rental experience to both sides of the coin, the landlord and the tenant, or the owner and the resident, as we prefer to refer to them as Base. But I think also, obviously, there are those looking to take that a bit further. We've seen agencies. Well, I mean, I think probably the biggest example of that is probably the Andrews Property Group. For those who are not fully au fait with that, it is, I believe, the only estate agency in the UK entirely owned by a charitable trust.
Yeah.
And I personally feel they don't shout anywhere near enough about their unique structure and what they do. They generate a phenomenal amount of money for good causes, for the very nature that they are owned and operated by a charitable trust. They are not there for profit, or they are there for profit, but for the purpose of using that profit for charitable causes and for good. And the amount of money that they generate through that is quite eye-watering, and it makes organisations several times their size fail in comparison, quite frankly. And we've got some other ones. The names are going to escape me now, but I know there's one that started up in Scotland. Which I think
there's good place lettings.
Oh, there you go. I was going to say I think it's good places, but
well, Good Place Lettings is an agency branch they've set up in London. I think it might be called Moving Places up in Scotland. So they're actually a development branch up there. They've done some amazing work. I'm actually going to be meeting with another Ben from Good Place Lettings in about 3 weeks' time, because we think there's potentially some work we might be able to do together, and just to chat about our business experience in that space. So there are some really cool options.
It's really exciting, right? Because these meetings, agents meeting with agents for opportunities, is nothing particularly new, but I think they were fundamentally driven by financial opportunity. And I think what's really exciting now is you're starting to see more and more of these things happening where they want to deliver a great service, but actually the end goal is a bit more altruistic. whether that's to do with local community or whatever. So, you know, on that, you know, let's kind of peel back the layers a little bit. Let's talk a little bit more in detail and specifics, Ben, about what your project has been kind of the last few years and what you're really passionate about. Because obviously, you know, you could have followed the tried and trusted kind of business model that, you know, Petermans has run on for the last sort of 60, 70 years. Fairly traditional family agency expanding as it does over time. But, you know, you made a decision. How long ago is it now? About
a year and a half it's been, there or thereabouts. Yeah, a year and a half or so. For me, actually, funnily enough, we've done work with so I'll step back before I say. So what we are doing, wind it back. What we do is we create solutions to the problems that there are in social housing and private rental crossover.
So let's crystallize that down a bit more. So what are the problems that you saw that basically made you go, do you know what? I think we can try and help find some sort of solution here.
It's a good question.
What are you talking about?
So I've always seen it as the fact that the PRS is such a huge beast, and it is very diverse in how it's delivering its service, and obviously the quality of that, you know, and the thoroughness of that is so varied. I've always felt there's space to do more, and that is obviously quite varied in itself. But I toyed with the idea because I actually did a bit of work with a company whose initial sort of work was housing social housing tenants into private rental properties. They came to me and just said, look, we've got some tenants who are, or they call them members, who are looking to be placed in private rental. They gave me a good breakdown of how the service worked. And said, you know, most agents won't talk to us, you know. So they actually, we did one deal with them as a trial run. You know, they passed industry references, they had a guarantor, and it all went really well. So they then asked me to come and give a talk to them, and they're a big company. They're called Beam. They're a big company.
Oh, Beam. Yeah.
So Beam have been quite a big part of my journey into this space. I gave a talk to their house hunting team, as it was back then, about the PRS and about, you know, how they can tailor what they do to make it work to get more landlords on board. And by that point, I'd done months of research into APPG for homelessness and housing and housing security, you know, stuff like damp and mold. And we'd had the first sort of rumblings of a subject you know very well about, the Renters' Rights Bill. Yeah, does anyone know what that is? I mean, at this point, do we even know? Yeah, something. And
I'm not meeting a tenant yet who knows what's coming down the line. But
good luck. I'm not sure most people.
I don't want to derail your social.
Well, the Renters' Rights Bill has a big part to play in my journey, to be honest with you, because what I had come to realize is that there was quite clearly a way that the private rental sector and the social housing space can work as long as there are enough voices that are all listening to each other and working together.
Yeah.
Landlords have got, or have had, the old adage of social housing from 20, 30 years ago. I'm not going to say that's wrong, because the system has changed over time.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, in some ways, it still hasn't. But in the ways it has done, there is a way with which we can present social housing tenants in a secure pathway for landlords. That means they can be put in the same conversation as private rental tenants. It's about using the right connections. It's putting together all the issues that landlords rightfully have got, you know, tenure, the state of the property, the price, and figuring out ways to offset those risk elements in a way that provides a service that gets the ridiculously high number of households on the waiting list for local authorities down. brings down the shockingly high spend on temporary accommodation, which, to be honest, is probably one of the biggest problems in the housing sector. And there is so much property that can be used for this space that does not come to the detriment of the tenant or the landlord. And you put this really well in our chat before we started. That is the key, is having stakeholders in this conversation working together, not against each other. And that's been the whole reason.
It's them and us rhetoric, haven't we? I think that is, like I said, I think our industry is evolving. Our industry generally, or at least kind of the better third, are definitely evolving to a more kind of harmonious conversation and the value that everyone delivers.
Yeah.
But I think generally, and particularly outside our sector, I mean, as we know, there is horrendous rhetoric around landlords. And
it's insane. It's insane.
10, 15, 20 years, really now. But I think particularly kind of last 5-10 years, I think since COVID and the cost of living crisis and everything else, you know, everything seems to be dialed up to 11 at the moment. And there's a lot of angry rhetoric, I would say, and far more, I think, coming from the tenant resident side aimed at landlords. There's a lot of
absolutely
really unjustified rhetoric there, and I think often driven by parties with not as transparent motives as they might like people to believe.
I completely agree.
Won't dive into that too much more, but yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I've shouted as often as I can when we see this, whether it's aimed at landlords in general or our industry or both. But I think there's something really interesting as well. There's this there's a very interesting kind of language and conversation around basically landlords and monetizing, you know, accommodation that you don't see in the same way in any other field, right? So if we look at the fact that we all need a roof over our head, it's a core thing that everybody needs. Absolutely great. The vast majority of landlords provide that to a reasonable to good standard, provide an okay, you know, support service, and charge a relatively reasonable rent in line with market conditions. The perception of what landlords are and how much money they make out of landlording, I think, is often skewed with the real life understanding of it. But I think also when you look at housing is an essential thing, you know, then we look at utilities, right? Let's look at utilities. People have been angry with the way utilities costs have spiraled the last few years.
Yeah.
But I don't feel you see anywhere near the same vociferous kind of and rather nasty dialogue around that in the same way that you do see about landlords. You know, supermarkets, we all need food to eat, we all need things to drink, you know, although somehow it's fine for Sainsbury's to make £1 billion a year profit on that.
The landlord thing is because it's personal.
Team for cost cutting and profit driving things, which they're very quickly forgiven for. But there isn't that same dialogue of profiteering out of people needing to eat. But there is this dialogue about greedy profiteering landlords, you know, rinsing the public.
It's because it's an easy win. It's an easy win. It's easy for bait headlines. It's easy because the perception of the landlord is it's very capitalist. It's very right. It's very it's a bit like the kind of Tudor sort of barons and landowners that they hold the power over the heads of everybody. And
the language and the terminology, which is why, you know, a lot of us try and move away from You know, we were massively inspired by the likes of Paramount Properties, you know, looking at the language we use.
Yeah.
And, you know, landlord tenant, like you said, that does literally hark back to Tudor times and your landlord.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it does hark back to a lot of that. But I think something else that's also really interesting is I think there is an element of jealousy or envy that sits beneath all of this. Because I think the interesting thing is, you know, you use the examples I used before of supermarkets, of utility suppliers, big corporate entities. Now, I think we all know ultimately there aren't too many big corporate entities out there that are primarily driven by the great they deliver socially to their market. They tend to have rather focused attention on profit and returns and dividends and growth. And typically pretty much everything else comes quite a distant second place to those primary objectives. But then when you look at landlords, you know, as you and I both know, there's roughly, you know, rounding off figures, 4 million-ish PRS homes, 2 million-ish PRS landlords, 2 properties a landlord. And you and I both know there are portfolio landlords in there. So for every landlord with 30 properties, you've got 30 landlords with 1 property.
Yeah.
And so I find it fascinating that the attitudes towards a huge corporate entity that is focused almost exclusively on profit and not much else gets in the way of that is kind of given that, but they're right. And then your individual landlords, where that property is going to be their pension, going to be their retirement fund, because Jesus Christ, I mean, you know, there's a very real possibility that people from our generation won't have a government pension by the time you retire, and that I mean, that's scary as shit to talk about. But if that kind of support system goes away, you know, we will hark back to the days where people got to have a property that they could leverage at retirement age, on their way, you know, through the later stages of life. But it's really interesting, the dialogue around it. Like I say, you would expect, this is what I always find fascinating about human psychology, you would expect the rhetoric to be the opposite. Nasty corporates, hey, they're just people, you know, trying to do the best they can and set themselves up without being overly egregious. But the dialogue's the opposite. I find it fascinating.
And I think that's why that's essentially why, in a way, why we are doing what we're doing, and it's why it's moved on to, you know, going through this sort of funding and investment pathway to start getting us being able to develop our own stock. Because whilst we can do this and reach landlords, you know, we get inquiries through open rent. You know, we do get the inquiries coming through to house within the way that we do. I think the way you've put it is exactly the problem. So for me, the easiest way that I believe we can show that the industry can directly affect in a quicker way is to start finding ways to create supply. And as you know, again, as you and I spoke about before we started, I'm not sure the government's plan has been especially well thought out. And I'm being diplomatic because I have no idea who will be listening to this. I've done talks to local authorities, been to the Crisis Homeless Summit, where the now ousted housing minister spoke very positively about the government's plans, and we all know what happened to her, and for whatever reasons that happened. We are in a unique position to be able to understand what is required on both sides, on all sides, because we've placed ourselves in the middle of the conversation so that the rhetoric out there is about collaborative work rather than, as you say, it's their fault. I could easily sit here and tell you, you know, one charity that likes to put headlines out there against landlords.
I can't imagine who
that is, and not Crisis, by the way.
Crisis are fantastic.
I love Crisis. I love them.
Crisis. And perfect example, quick side break here, perfect example about how you can have a passionate objective that appears in contrast to how the marketplace works, but you understand the fact that a solution is only going to be reached by collaborating, by talking, by having those difficult conversations to understand why this isn't assimilating better, why we're not finding problems better, and actually sitting down at the same table. I absolutely adore Crisis. And yes, in stark contrast to other very outspoken groups, and I think anyone who knows the PRS, we don't need to name them. We all know who they are. Some fall like little nuts from a tree, and others like to sit in the corner and rant. But yeah, I think in what has become common political dialogue now, it is very animalistic. It's very tribalistic. It is very we're going to burn down the system. But interestingly, again, aligning with a lot of politics, a lot of that conversation is being driven by people who are not directly impacted by what they are doing.
No, and that's why people like Ben Beadle at the NRLA, who's doing a great job of trying to put a landlord's perspective out there, he's doing great work. And there are people on a larger scale doing stuff similar. What I've come to realize in my time doing this is that there are a lot of people doing work that people don't hear about. I think I mentioned to you before, there's been some people I've met with over the last couple of weeks who are doing some incredible work, in different ways. They're called Ben and Sylvia on LinkedIn. They're based in Croydon. Check them out on LinkedIn. They're doing a really cool sort of work with down in Croydon and Kent, where they're looking at how they can make the system work from the job placement space beginning and then working through to the housing side after that. And I think they're amazing. And he's 23 years old and he's doing.
Wow.
I know, right? I thought I was doing well at my age, but which I won't ask you to guess how old that is, but.
I think you look great for 62.
I feel older, Kristjan. But they're doing amazing work there. There's another chap, Richard Drawater, at his company there, RJ&T Housing. They're based up in Liverpool. And he's doing some fantastic work from a vantage point, having been a social housing tenant, where he's trying to start an investment round to get himself to be a registered provider. With his experience, he'd be amazing at it. There's all these individual stories of really experienced people who in different ways, and experienced through research, experienced through life experience through who they've met along the way, who can really put into perspective how easy it is to make the system work. It's also people like Sue Smith. It's people like you who cut through the noise and just give us facts, give us examples of things that work and why they work. And that's what we're doing and what we aim to do more.
I've felt for a long time, and this isn't just in housing, I felt for a long time like kind of social entrepreneurism, for want of a better phrase. I think is what is going to shift the needle. It's what is going to change lives. Because for whatever reason, government are unwilling or unable at a local or national level to figure this shit out. When we look at housing, we look at the biggest problem, which we all know, which is that we can't seem to hold on to our housing minister for more than 6 months at a time. I mean, and that sounds like some sort of over-exaggerated.
No.
As we both know, for the last 20 years, we average something like 9 months per period for a housing minister. And as we both know, most of those people come in. Sometimes they're a landlord with 1 or 2 properties on their books, but that being a landlord of 1 or 2 properties did not make you a housing expert.
No.
Outside of that, if they're not that, but even if they are outside of that, they tend to have little to no knowledge of planning, housing, developing, etc., etc.
Agency, and I think people overlook the importance of agency and the expertise surrounding agency.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as we know, the ones that have come in with good intentions have come in and been like, okay, I don't know what I don't know. I'm going to spend the next 3 to 6 months figuring out what this beast of housing is and where the real problems are.
Yeah.
And just about as they start wrapping their head around what the core issues are, they get offered a role somewhere else, or they get pushed somewhere else, and we're back to square one. And I think, you know, fundamentally, I mean, I can't imagine anyone being able to drive and deliver a successful housing policy who wasn't in situ for at least 5 years. You know, both know, and that's, you know, minimum.
Yeah.
Really, I think you're going to probably need like a 10-year remit, because we all know how slow everything is, you know, to drive change in planning and development and funding and access to all of those things.
Yeah.
It is such a beast of a job, and so much foundational kind of structure needs literally tearing to pieces and remapping, that without a person or an organization there to lead that for at least 5 years, we're not going to get anywhere. And we're not going to have anyone sit in that role for 5 years. We're also, I'm one of many people who for years have been clamoring for depoliticizing housing. It's never going to fucking happen, because as we all know, it is a beautiful voting swinger to kick about, regardless of whether you deliver on any of the pledges or not. I mean, I think we can argue that every government for the last 20 or 30 years has pretty much fucking fallen flat on their ass on their housing pledges. So, you know, on the one hand, we've got this thing which can swing quite a lot of votes, but on the other hand, the fact that actually whatever they say to swing the votes doesn't materialize anyway. So yeah, I think, you know, we can keep on waiting and banging on the walls for government to sort its shit out and figure out how to deliver housing. And the fact that housing is nuanced, you know, you touched on it as well. It's something that always infuriates me. Sales or lettings, it doesn't matter. We talk about housing and the market in the UK like it is a single entity. I mean, as we all know, it is a cluster of micro communities and regulations and attitudes and planning processes, and you know, it's my God, it is such a complex beast. And I think, you know, what gets lost is in the media, there's so much dialogue that talks about the housing market.
Well, it's like you said, it's a vote winner, isn't it? It's a headline winner, isn't it? To just find something to blame. Whereas from my experience, and I'm sure you'll find the same, being, you know, an entrepreneur in this space, I use that term because I prefer that than trying to say in the housing market, as you've just said. In this space, it's a lot easier to find people to work with rather than listen to people telling you can't work with anyone. And that's been why we've got to the position of funding as it is, and looking at developing, because people believe in what we're doing. People believe in the mission. They believe in, and I say a mission, you know, it's not a not-for-profit, obviously, you know, it is a development branch as such, but with the aim of getting as many families housed. And you mentioned this at the start about everybody working together. Our strapline's always been everyone under one roof. From the first day of inception, that's been the phrase that we've stuck with, because that's what we believe can work. And doing it this way, you know, whether it's straight development, whether it's repurposing properties, you know, period properties, buildings with 6 flats in it, you know, turning into potentially looking at the HMO market, but that in itself has been ostracized. You'll have heard, I'm sure, the number of groups and individuals saying about how tough it is for the HMO market. You know, there are definitely sections of the social housing space that would greatly benefit from the HMO space, and do. It's pushing it all to one side, finding a way to make the system work, and that's what we believe we've done, or we can continue to do in London, and as you mentioned before we start speaking, hopefully beyond that, because we can do this if people believe that we can keep all the problems ticked, all the boxes ticked,
Yeah.
which is it's how I started this whole thing, is start with the problems, find the solutions, and then push the service. And that's where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think when you first came to me and told me what your guys' kind of plans and ambitions were, I thought it was great
Be
to
honest.
hear a commercial. Great to hear a commercial agency thinking more altruistically in terms of community and social. I think there is, again, harking back to this weirdness of human psychology. I think there is this fascinating kind of dichotomy about, you can be a profit-making business, or you can be a socially beneficial business, but you can't be both, because they conflict with one another. And I think there's a really interesting topic of conversation there, because it's like, sorry, so you're saying an outright for-profit business is better than a business that juggles profit and social purpose? Bizarre. You also set up a system for failure, because if you say, right, you can only be socially beneficial, you can only be a charitable business if you are a bona fide not-for-profit, you are then building a business that relies entirely on funding. There is no simple way around that fact. If you are not allowed to be a commercially viable generating business, you build a business that is reliant on grants and funds and donations and everything else.
I won't go into how hard that is. It's
exactly, that is complicated enough as it is. But again, as we've touched on, you have a new housing minister, you have a new local government, you have a new national government. These are constantly changing at different times and cycles, and like that, overnight you could be delivering an amazing business and suddenly wake up one morning to find that half your funding's coming to an end.
Yeah.
And we've seen it with businesses. One thing I've always felt fascinated, one thing that has kicked around my head for years, and I think we touched on this when you and I were first talking early doors, and it's always been something that if someone doesn't pursue it before then, it's something I really want to pursue down the line, is what I find really interesting when you look back to the times of the Industrial Revolution, right? When you look back to the very kind of, you could argue, the kind of root of capitalism, right? Where people really started looking at, particularly in this country, commercialization at scale, workforces at scale, substantial kind of industrial output. Fascinatingly, what you got back then, and for the ones who did it right, we all know there were plenty that didn't, but for the ones who did it right, they built mills, but they built quality schooling, they built quality housing, they built on-site education, they built, the good ones did it right. You look back at one of the biggest social housing providers at the turn of the century was Guinness.
Yeah.
They used to build housing all over the nation. And I think what's really fascinating is that we now live in a world where that business model has been put on fucking hyperdrive, and we have our Teslas and our Googles and our Apples and our Facebooks making billions, if not, trying to get to the $1 trillion profit mark.
Yeah.
And yet there is none of this infrastructure. There is none of this delivery. And I personally think it would be fascinating to get in front of some of these companies with mega money and be like, you know what? Why don't you give me 100 million quid? And I'm going to build Facebook social housing. I'm going to build Google. You want to elevate your brand beyond a fucking logo and beyond, YouTube views commission. Why don't you really shift the needle and do shit that the original
actually makes a difference? Yeah.
Did at scale.
Yeah.
And also potentially have the weight of that organization behind you, not to only go to, you know what, fucking love it, here's 100 million quid. But we're not only going to give you that, you have access to our legal team.
Well, if anyone's listening from those organizations, we're pretty set up. I'll bring Kristjan along as well, We're right here.
Any organization out there, if this, it's something that has been kicking around my head for at least 5 years now, is we did it before. Why can't we do it again? And fascinating, you look at the reputation these companies and their bosses are getting to at the moment. This, you know, we're reaching the heights of social disparity and income disparity. And I think, you know, fascinatingly, it would be a way that those businesses could dramatically pivot in pretty much every single one of their major markets. You know, housing is a problem worldwide. It's not a UK only problem. Yeah, you know, overnight they could pivot. They could still hold assets. You know, they're not even losing money. Everything they put in would still be an asset that you hold. You would obviously need to work hard and work tirelessly to make sure that all the contracts and structure of that can't be leveraged unethically in the future. I think that would be probably the biggest challenge is getting that initial architecture, particularly from a legal perspective, right, to enshrine it so that it remains a socially focused object. But for me, I think it's a fascinating thing. You know, I think, you know, when we look at, you know, let's stop talking about fucking fruit salad bowls and ping pong nights and, you know, and pizza Thursdays with the big companies. You know, let's really see them delivering some big shit.
Money where your mouth is. Yeah.
Start investing in some amazing students and paying off their student debt. Put a shit ton of money into creating a bona fide social housing platform that delivers social change, delivers housing that people want. And look what that will do for your brand. You think people are loyal to your brand now? Put them in a fucking quality home for half the market rate and see how fucking loyal they become then.
Yeah,
you know?
No argument here.
And the other fascinating thing is it kind of feeds back into their business model, because guess what? You put people in housing where they've got more disposable income. Guess what the fuck they tend to do with that disposable income? Spend it on products and services. So, you know, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But yeah, look, I think anyone listening to this, if you are wrestling with social kind of considerations like this within your agency, anywhere in the country, and you feel like you want to figure out how you can work to deliver this, guys, please reach out to Ben, have a chat, figure out, you know, learn from what they've learned and hopefully collaborate together. As Ben has alluded to, you know, the big focus for them is to now really try and move into the development side. So what we really need is people with land, buildings, particularly commercial buildings. Change of use is relatively accessible in most areas of the country. You know, these are the kinds of people that Ben and the organizations he's collaborating and talking to want to talk to. So if you're someone sat with a parcel of land, with a parcel of building, you think, you know what, I want to do something, be nice if it had a bit of a return, but I also want to give something back. This is a very good avenue for you to figure that out. So if you're someone like that, listen to this. If you know someone like that and you're listening to this, and particularly if you know someone who holds the purse strings at any of the mega businesses that we're talking about, send them the link to this podcast, get them to have a listen, get them to reach out to Ben, and yeah, have a chat. But I think it's a really exciting phase for our industry, and I think, you know, I think it's great to see people like you, you know, just asking the questions, trying to do something a bit different, you know, win, lose or fail, you know, something will come out in the wash, you know, and you're already doing some good, and hopefully, you know, that will continue to grow. So I applaud you and the others like you, and yeah, keep doing what you're doing. So we're going to trickle off the back of that, and we're going to pivot slightly differently into a chat that we were having before we came on air, in that you have recently had a second child. Yes, I have. We have. I did not have the child. No, we have had it. Yes. I said it was you in the plural.
You plural. Yes, we have had our second child. Yeah. We've got a 4 and a bit year old at home who's just about to start school, and yes, we have a nearly 2-month-old who has shaken the tree, shaken the everything, the tree, the planet, the bed, my brain. Yeah, he's adorable though. So he
So
makes
you and I start having a chat. So obviously, my kids are about 3 or 4 years older, but similar age gap. My lad's about to turn 4 next month. Just annoyingly misses the school cutoff by like 2 weeks.
Oh, okay.
We've got to wait another year.
Oh, dear.
Like A is quite frustrating for us, but B, that boy is ready for school, man.
Yeah, I'll bet.
He was using some of it. We were having a chat last night, and he was using words like automatically. I was like, huh?
Nice.
He came out with some really good long words. I was like, Jesus Christ, dude, you need to get yourself to school. So we've got that, and then our daughter turns 8 in December, and she's just finished year 2. So
Nice.
know, where you are, but 3 years down the line.
Yeah.
And you and I had a bit of a chat because we're both fundamentally entrepreneurs within our business, within our sector, within our field. We're commercially driven as well as we've touched on, not just being about the financials, wanting to deliver something that's quality and we feel good and right about. How do you find juggling parenthood, particularly right now? I know it's like when the new ones come around. How do you find juggling the two, and how do you kind of decide where that line falls on any given day?
Oh, it's a good question. That's a really good question. I can imagine there's probably loads of parents, and I think you said it before, lots of dads who probably, I don't know, maybe feel like they know the answer to that. I didn't. Everything changed when Ezra, our first, came, and then since Hendrix came, that was my wife's one. That we were listening to Crosstown Traffic in the car, and she just turned to me and was just like, "Hendrix would be a really good name." I was like, "Yeah." She's Indian. She's Indian, so I think the mixed heritage has definitely played into his like coolness.
Amazing.
But yeah, our work in everyone's work-life balance with children is tough. I like you, I think we're very hands-on and enjoy being hands-on. So that line between the importance of pushing the work and what you're doing at work and your time at home is so personal, right? It's like, it's so focused. It's so based, I suppose, really on, I guess, how your childhood was, but also how that then plays into how you want to parent. And I'm no way a judgmental parent on anybody. We all have our priorities in life. I found that having started the initiative, Petermans Housing Initiatives, I've never been an entrepreneur before. We all sit in the pub with our mates and think that setting up a pub is a really good idea when we're 19 and 20 and whatever. And then, you find something that's your spark. And you're like, fuck, this is what I want to do with my life. That came after we unfortunately had a miscarriage. A little long a year. Oh God, it was about.
Which is surprisingly common. I mean, again, it's a thing.
It is, but no one talks about it.
Talked about.
Nope.
A friend of mine, I think, went through 5 before they had their first child.
It's probably one of the worst experiences in my life. And I suppose with the time we've got, we could probably talk about that another time. But what it did do was give me a bit of a focus, because I've been thinking about doing this, and it did give me a thing like, shit, I want to do what I've said I'm going to do. And you said it, for my kids. And obviously back then I thought it was just Ezra. And things progressed from there. And then when Hendrix came along, it was like, oh my God, I'm fucking exhausted again. I've forgotten that newborns don't know shit about sleeping. So you're just like, okay, I sleep for 3 hours a day. But I also don't want to miss the first time he smiles, which thank God I didn't, because he is, and it's adorable. So yeah, it's like, I think I would always want to try and be there for all the milestones. And you mentioned when we were talking before this about that that age up to 10, I think you said.
I think I shared a couple of things with you, and I might have shared them before, but I think they're always worth sharing again. There were two things I read, and like I said, I don't remember exactly when I read them, whether it was just before or after we had LV, but somewhere in that early phase. And there are two things that have really shaped my attitude towards parenting, and like I said, how I make that distinction and differentiation between what is more important at any given time. And so the first of those was exactly that. It was, I'd read a story. It was about an entrepreneur who, like so many, was like, I'm going to build a business. It's going to be a success, and that's going to enable me to give my family the most amazing life. We're going to live in a big house, and we'll have a swimming pool, and we'll go on amazing holidays all year. And he spent 15 years building this business, did everything he set out to do, but as so many entrepreneurs do, worked obsessively for that 15 years building that business, exited the business, made a shit ton of money, 20, 30, 40 million quid, happy days, basically kind of turned around to his then teenage kids and was like, great guys, what should we do? And his kids basically turned around to him and in his own words were more or less like, sorry, who the fuck are you? We've had no, who are you? Like, you're someone who pays the bills. We've had no relationship with you for 15 years. And guess what? When your kids are 15, 16, 17, 18, if you've raised them right, or maybe not, they want to start treading out. They want to be going out with their mates and going to festivals and going on holidays with their friends and exploring and adventuring and developing that independence. And guess what? Particularly if you've not been around, they're not interested in you being part of that journey because you haven't been part of that journey before. And I think that massively, with where we were 7-8 years ago with Base, we hadn't quite yet made the decision to start with the Depositary yet. But that very much framed that consideration. So now anytime I'm invited to something that is, an evening or a weekend or, means it's going to be head down, lock in stuff, there is that internal question of, is this worth the sacrifice?
And that's okay as well. I feel like sometimes people feel like, oh, now that I'm back at work, I've got to be back at work. I think it's okay to question whether you want to prioritize that and not have that come back to you and think, oh, I don't care about my work anymore. Or it's like, you're always going to want to be around your kids, and it's okay to want to be around them.
Yeah.
And don't feel bad about that. I don't. I miss them whenever I'm not around them, even when they're, really fucking annoying, which toddlers, oh my God. Yeah. They know to push your buttons, baby less so. But it's okay to be an all-in dad, an all-in.
And find that balance. Equally, I think it's also, it's also okay. I think
to not
to be aware.
Exactly right.
Permanently present mum or dad. It doesn't mean that the kids always have to come first, because I don't think that's healthy either.
No, agreed.
If we do want to build things that are going to deliver a certain quality of life and a certain, if nothing else, a certain security for you and your kids going forward, education, housing, etc. There are going to be some tough choices. You are going to do those odd late nights. You are going to have to go away for that odd business trip. I think it's just about, for me, it's just about making sure you ask yourself that question. Don't default into turning down every opportunity because you can't spend.
You want to be there.
And equally, don't sideline your kids to build this epic empire that they're not really fucking interested in.
Absolutely. That's exactly it. It is so much. And you're only going to know that the more time you give yourself.
Yeah. And, that first 10 years, that first roughly 10 years of your kid's life, their world revolves around you. You feed them, you house them, you clothe them, you increasingly drive them around, you become their parent taxi, everything else. Once you start coming out of that phase and they start getting their independence, and again, if you're raising your kids right, they will strive to have that element of independence in life. yeah, you become less significant. So make the most of it. And the other thing we touched on as well, you know, for me, for reframing, is this thing of your kid's age. And we touched on it. You know, I said to you the other day, when Elvie turned 7, I turned to my wife on her birthday and went, you do realize she's a third of the way to 21.
I don't want to start thinking like that, because that's it's a good thing to think.
It just keeps you focused, because honestly, that 7 years, I don't know where the fuck that has gone. How that girl is about to turn 8 in, you know, in what, where are we now? August. In 4 months' time, she would already be 8. You know, that has gone. You know, and the fact that she's, you know, a third of the way to being 21, you know, and again, reframing it, that 10 plus, she's halfway to 14.
Yeah.
You know, she's halfway to terrifying me and blowing my mind.
See, I've got 2 boys, so
you think that's going to be fine.
My biggest concern is going to be when they start, you know, diving head first off of a wall into the park, and you know,
different problems, isn't it?
Yeah.
For Mount Everest peak.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but no, I think for me, those are 2 things that landed very close to one another, and for quite obvious reasons, have really, really stuck in my brain. And for me, they are the thing I come back to. But I think also, you know, we're different people with different parents as well. You know, I think the reality is, as much as we may want to be, we are not all cut out to be great parents. And also we have different skill sets at phases of our kids' lives.
Yeah.
So, you know, again, we touched on this earlier, you know, don't force yourself to be a stay-at-home dad in the first year of your kid's life. If spending time with a dribbling lunatic drives you up the fucking wall. You know, I mean, I remember very vividly when we had Elvie. I remember the first 3 months that we had Elvie I found really weird.
Me too.
You have this image built up of your first kid, dad, and it comes along, and wow, it's
so beautiful. They're the best thing ever.
Life-changing thing it is. And then what you don't fucking realise, unless you've probably done your research, because I suppose some dads do, but knowing most dads, we haven't, is they come along, they can't fucking see shit for the first month. You know, if your wife's able and willing to breastfeed, which mine was very happy to do, you know,
same here.
You know, and unlike you, I was very lucky. Our two little beasts have been very good sleepers when they decide to fucking sleep. But then, yeah, they are epic. But that first 3 months, like I think I took 4 or 6 weeks paternity leave.
Yeah.
You know, it was the great thing, obviously being self-employed and having a business partner who's incredibly supportive, you know, and it was like, you are fucking off and you are enjoying this. Like, go be a dad. Yeah, don't rush back. And that was amazing to have that support. Coincidental and quite fortuitous that she was born in December, when typically our business is really quiet.
Your Christmas break.
But then I really fucked it with the second one, because we had him in September, which is peak summer season. So chalk and balanced it there. But that first 3 months, I found bewildering as a dad, right? Because I have never been so excited about something and then found myself to be so utterly irrelevant.
Yeah. It's like you're looking at just a little creature.
I felt like nothing but an annoyance, like to both, primarily to my wife. It was like,
I'll take the child. You take child. Child cries. Go to sleep. Cry. Okay, that didn't work half an hour. We're all more stressed than we were before. You could have just gone and done the dishes.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember, I mean, I've always been really brutally direct with everyone in my life. And so my in-laws don't get any different treatment. And my mother-in-law, I remember those first 3 months, I think she was slightly traumatized by my reaction, because literally every day she came around, she didn't come around every day. Every time she came to see us, I'd kind of open the front door to us and she'd be like, Hi, darling. Isn't being a dad amazing? And I would just look at her like blank face and be like, sure.
It's all right.
I mean, let me know when it starts. I was so deadpan for the first 3 months. I remember even after a few weeks, but my mother-in-law being like, right, you're all right, you seem a bit. And I'm like, Jane, I've never felt like more of a spare wheel in my entire fucking life. I've never felt so irrelevant. And then, like you said, you get to that 3-month mark, and all of a sudden, you have that proper moment of eye contact with your kid for the first time. You have that first smile, that first giggle, and then it shifts gears, and then it changes. But and funnily enough, I remember talking to a lot of my mates who. Most of my mates kind of had kids just before us. We kind of had ours kind of later than most. But I remember talking about this with quite a few of my mates, and being like, "You too? Thank fuck." I've had loads of friends be like, "I couldn't tell anyone. I faked it for 3 months. I was faking this."
It's so lovely.
Thing up there. They were like, "It was all bullshit. I had no idea what was going on. I've never felt so irrelevant."
Yeah.
It was really fascinating to talk about it, because I had loads of mates be like, "Oh shit, that wasn't just me. I wasn't just being weird." It's like, no, because you were we were irrelevant.
You don't help.
Making sure there's a roof over our head and like fetching some water at the right temperature when someone needed it. Like,
you might change a nappy.
Yeah, basically that was it. So yeah, I think that it's
talking. It's what does it? Just talk to people.
Yeah.
You feel like it's building up too much, tell somebody. That's it.
Yeah, and I think also, I think fascinatingly, when we look at work and parenting, and I think, another reason men will often default to a work situation rather than a parenting situation. And again, I've talked about this a bit in the boys' club. That we have, the kind of closed mental health group on Facebook, is that what I find really fascinating is work's really, really easy, even when you own the business, right? You fundamentally know when you turn up and do a day at work, you fundamentally know whether you've put the work in that day. When you walk out the door at the end of the night, you know whether you've done a productive day.
Yeah. You
know if you've moved the needle. Sometimes those are literally specific results. I've done XYZ deals, I've generated XYZ income, or it's I'm working towards delivery of this project, and we've made some substantial ground. It's measurable. The problem with parenting, totally fucking unmeasurable. And you can feel like you've been the best dad in the world, and then your partner will be like, "Oh, I can't believe you didn't sort this out," and you're like,
yeah,
fuck, yes, I should have absolutely done that. Or you think you've just given your child like the best day ever, and they turn around where's mommy? Whatever it is, and you're just like, and I think I think for a lot of guys, I think it's that thing of like I said, it's just this clearer black and white area of I'm doing it right, I'm doing it wrong, I'm doing it badly.
So
and I think
it's so grey. It's so grey. It's not black and white.
It's an important thing. Be there as much as as much as you can. Like I said, you have to be truthful to yourself.
Yeah.
I know lots of people who have gone through phases with their kids where particular phases they just can't relate. They're there, they do what they have to do, but there are phases in their life where they're just like, I cannot build a connection with you here. I can't have a conversation with you. I can't.
They're developing, aren't they?
Exactly.
Everyone is. Just because we're adults doesn't mean that we're not developing ourselves. We are developing the way that we are with children, and the children are relating and developing in the way that they deal with us as parents, but also growing as humans. So no one's going to be able to make it click exactly right all the time. Like no one does, adults don't, marriages don't.
And look, also, like you said, I grew up, I've talked a lot about the fact, I grew up, we traveled around a lot. I went to boarding school from 8 years old with my parents on the other side of the world. but I had a great relationship with my parents. You know, my dad was a bit of a workaholic. You know, if he wasn't working, he was playing cricket.
Good lad.
But fascinatingly, you know, and as is common with our generation, there were swathes of time where parenting was basically just leaving me to my own devices.
You've spoken to my mum, so I'll
jokes on Facebook. You know, I'd literally go out in the morning and come back at night, and my parents would have no idea where I'd been all day, and I could have been anywhere from watching TV around a mate's house to climbing down a well. You know, it was literally anything in between those.
You climbed down a well, didn't you?
Yeah. Those are two real life examples. But you know, it's fascinating because I didn't necessarily have anywhere near the amount of hands-on time that traditional parents had because of the type of upbringing.
I think it's generational as well, though.
Well, I had a fantastic relationship with my kids. I loved my upbringing. Like I said, I was a very independent kid. Like boarding school for me, as I said, I was, you know, when I was 3, 4, 5 years old, I wasn't the kid who cried when you get dropped off for a sleepover. I was the kid who cried when your parents turned up to pick you up. Boarding school. I fucking love boarding school. I slotted into that shit like nobody's business. I remember literally lying in bed the first night, 8 years old. My parents were in Singapore on the other side of the world. In fact, it's a half lie. Mum stayed for the first few weeks. I think she found me going to boarding school much harder.
Well, and you will do now if you're.
Oh, I mean, my wife and I talked about it just hypothetically. No, I would want to. I don't want my kids to be raised by someone else. As much as the opportunities and the amazing array, you know, that I had access to through my education. To amazing schools and you know, literally, particularly the second school, which is a school called Stowe, which for those who don't know is one of those uber posh, uber privileged schools. It is absolutely fucking mental. It's an old stately mansion, 758 acres of landscape gardens, at a 9-hole golf course, 3 lakes, you name it. Had a polo team. It had its own beagling kennels. You know, it was like bonkers. Wow. Fucking mental. I went to school with major industrialists, capitalists, princes from nations around the world, all sorts of stuff. And yeah, little old me was there with my dad at times, desperately struggling to pay the bills.
Well, you turned out all right, so
you know, kind of. But yeah, it was a fascinating upbringing. But it's fascinating, this stuff we bring in. Like I said, I loved my upbringing. I had a fantastic relationship with my parents growing up. Adored them. We were very close, but achieved that through actually fairly limited time together, particularly once I turned 8. And yeah, but kind of my obsession is spending as much time as I can with my kids. You know, you and I were talking earlier. I love doing the school run.
Yeah, me too.
Every morning, the school is like a 10-12 minute walk from our house. It's a really lovely walk. You know, Elvie goes to school. We've got a childminder who picks up from school. So 2 days a week, 3 days a week, 2 days a week. God, you can tell we're halfway through the summer fucking holidays, can't you? 3 days a week picks up Arlo from school. So 3 days a week, it's both of them. 2 days of the week, it's just Elvie. And I fucking adore that time. It's precious. You know, sometimes we talk, sometimes we prat around, sometimes we walk, sometimes she'll skateboard or cycle or whatever it is she's decided is her mode of transport for that morning.
Sure.
But, you know, I was saying to you, my missus turned around to me last year and was like, look, I can tell you've got a lot on at work and you're kind of stressing a little bit about your workload. You know, why don't I take over doing the school run and you can go in and do an extra hour each day? And I was like, get the fuck back. I was like,
don't you take this from me.
Do not touch it. I was like, no. I was like, I'd rather be stressed because having that moment in the morning and then going off to work, you know, that just fills me up for the day. And then I get back in the evening and I always make sure, again, with the exception of kind of 5 to 10 nights of the year when it's usually some sort of industry event, I'm always there for dinner and bedtime.
Yeah.
You know, and those top and tail moments are really important. And I don't think there's an amount of money I could earn that would justify that. Because again, I know, you know, in a few years' time, Elvie's going to be like, you know, hopefully she won't be. Who knows? Maybe some kids don't. But, you know, there's a very good likelihood to be like, do you have to walk me to school? I'd rather just walk with Sally and Matt from around the corner. And
it's meant you would have done a good job, though.
Yeah, exactly. So
I hope to God Ezra doesn't. I mean, I'd say I'm the same. I love that morning with him dropping off at what will be school in September, but it's been nursery till now. But yeah,
it's really special. They're really lovely. You know, they're really, really lovely.
It is, but I also can understand that for some people, they're a bit like, it's all right. Like, everyone's different, right?
Exactly. And it's also circumstances, right? Like, you know, my business doesn't start till 10 o'clock in the morning. We made that conscious decision for the get-go. Yeah. I didn't used to be a particular morning person. Now I wake up at like 6:30, 7 o'clock.
You don't get a choice, so, you know.
Well, no, that's not the kids. My kids are good sleepers.
Oh, you did say, didn't you?
Yeah.
It is a good sleep for me, so don't be like, 6:30 is a good light sleep for me.
They're night owls. My little buggers stay up fucking late, little sods. But at least they have the common decency to have a decent lie-in with it.
Well, that's something at least.
But yeah, listen, Ben, I think we've kind of skirted around the two big things we wanted to talk today. I feel like we can sit here and waffle on for forever. But it's been an absolute joy, buddy.
Thank you so much, Kristjan. Honestly, I've loved it. It's been great.
And we'll talk again soon. So before we go, just to hark back to what we've been talking about. So if you're listening to this, and whether you're an agent, whether you're a landlord, whether you're anyone, you know, whether you find yourself in a circumstance or you know someone, Ben is really, really interested. And like I said, the organizations he works with, people who can really now help this kind of make the next big step. And like we said, that primarily will result in the access to some sort of land that can be developed or building that can be redeveloped. So if you are in that position or you know someone in that position, please reach out directly to Ben, chuck a comment on some of this content somewhere, do something, but please start that conversation. You're not obligated to anything. Ben will have had these conversations, I'm sure, 100 times over, and he'll have them probably 1,000 times again.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you just want to explore and understand a bit more of what that may look like and how that might work, just reach out and start the conversation. Like I said, if you know someone, nudge them our way, or Ben's way rather, to have a chat. And parenting wise, you know, love to hear what other people's thoughts are on parenting. Partly interested to hear from other guys, but also, you know, generally we've got more and more female entrepreneurs within our industry now.
Yeah, very impressive, very impressive.
Driving businesses, which is fantastic to see, but equally facing very similar juggling and balances. And obviously, you and I, Ben, are very lucky. We're very lucky that we have partners to juggle this workload with. My sister was a single parent, and I am mystified by what else that are able to manage and achieve. So I'm not even going to wade into that area. But hopefully today has been a little bit different, a little bit interesting, enlightening. Hopefully you kind of heard or learned some sort of things that, if nothing else, get the juices flowing. Ben, my man, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Loved it.
And look forward to catching up soon, mate.
Yeah,
all right.
Same. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.